What if the people you live under the same roof with every day aren't who they appear to be? One ordinary night, one silent house, and a secret that should have never been revealed. This was the night that shattered everything. Before we start the story, a small request. If you love real, shocking, and suspenseful stories, please subscribe to the channel, because this story will keep you on the edge until the very end. In a quiet little town in America, where life moves slowly, where people recognized each other by face rather than name, there was a street that locals unofficially called the perfect street. On this street, there was no noise, no scandal, and police cars never stopped here. And right in the middle of that street stood a beautiful house, white walls, blue door, and a perfectly trimmed front lawn. This was the home of the Whitmore family. Mark Whitmore was the kind of man the neighborhood was proud of. The morning after Laura Whitmore disappeared, the street was unusually quiet. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispers spreading like wildfire from one house to another. It was a small town where nothing stayed secret for long. But even here, no one could have imagined what was unfolding behind the white walls of the Whitmore home. The police had arrived, and their presence alone sent shivers down the spine of everyone watching. Detective Harris was the first to step inside, followed closely by his partner, a younger officer named Kim. The front door was unlocked, swinging slightly as if inviting them into the chaos that lay inside. Mark Whitmore met them at the threshold, his face calm, almost rehearsed, but his hands betrayed him, slightly trembling, fingers fidgeting against his coat. I don't know what happened," he said, voice steady but eyes avoiding theirs. She was just here last night. I went to sleep, and this morning she was gone." Detective Harris nodded, taking note of his tone and body language. Years of experience had taught him that calmness in moments like these often concealed panic, fear, or worse, deceit. The officers walked through the house. Everything seemed ordinary at first glance. Breakfast dishes still on the table, the kids' backpacks by the door, and the television left on a pause program. Nothing appeared disturbed. But Harris noticed the subtle details: the corner of a picture frame slightly tilted, a set of keys missing from the usual hook, a faint scent of perfume that didn't match Laura's usual brand. Mark led them to the living room where the children were seated, staring at the floor. His son, Tommy, barely 12, avoided eye contact entirely. His daughter, Emily, only 10, clutched a stuffed animal like it was a shield against the confusion surrounding her. Their silence was deafening, broken only by the soft creak of the floorboards as Harris moved around, inspecting the room. "Do either of you know where your mother went?" Kim asked gently. Emily shook her head, her small body trembling. Tommy mumbled something indistinct, his eyes fixed on the floor. Harris exchanged a look with Kim. There was more here than a simple disappearance. Something wasn't right. Mark suggested they start with the garage, explaining that Laura sometimes worked late on crafts and small projects. The garage smelled faintly of varnish and paint, as it always did, but there was a subtle difference, a faint footprint in the dust, slightly smudged. Harris knelt down to examine it, the pattern distinct enough to show that someone had walked here recently, after Laura's disappearance, or perhaps before. "This could be nothing," Mark said quickly, his voice rising slightly. "The kids play out here sometimes, maybe it's just them." But Harris wasn't convinced. The smudge didn't match the children's small feet. It was larger, adult-sized, deliberate. Back inside, Kim asked Mark about his whereabouts the previous night. He repeated the same story he had given neighbors. Dinner, then reading in his study until bed. Harris asked if anyone could confirm that. No one could. The kids were asleep early. Neighbors had not noticed anything unusual. It was then that Harris noticed something else: a notebook on the kitchen counter, partially hidden under a pile of mail. Its cover was plain, unremarkable. But inside, the pages were filled with neat, methodical handwriting. Laura's handwriting, presumably. Some pages were recent, with dates from just 2 days ago. But one entry caught Harris's attention. It read, simply, "I can't tell anyone. Not yet. They can't know. If they did, everything would end." No signature, no indication of whom she was referring to. But Harris felt it in his gut. This was a warning, and it was urgent. Mark noticed the notebook in Harris's hand and attempted to retrieve it, his voice sharper this time. "That's personal. You don't need to read that." Harris set it down calmly, but firmly. "Sir, any detail you've kept from us could be crucial. This is a missing person case." Mark's jaw tightened. He didn't argue further, but there was a tension now, a thin, almost imperceptible crack in his composed demeanor. Harris made a note of it. People usually reveal themselves in small ways before they speak openly. The children were taken to a neighbor's house to keep them safe, leaving Harris and Kim alone with Mark in the living room. Harris decided to push further. "Mark, tell me about your relationship with Laura. Anything unusual, anything at all, no matter how small," Harris said. Mark's lips pressed tightly together. "Unusual? No. We were happy. A normal family. Everything was normal." Harris leaned in slightly. "Normal families don't have missing parents overnight. Normal families don't hide secrets that can change everything." Mark's eyes flickered, a brief shadow crossing his face before it returned to calm. Harris noted it. This man knew more than he was letting on. The officers then examined the house room by room. Nothing overtly violent, nothing missing. But Harris's instincts screamed at him that the absence of disorder was just as suspicious as chaos. Sometimes the cleanest scenes hid the darkest truths. By late afternoon, Harris had made a decision to bring in forensic support. Fingerprints, dust analysis, and electronic records could provide the answers that polite questioning could not. Mark agreed without protest this time, a faint nod, almost robotic. As the sun set, the Whitmore house grew colder, not temperature-wise, but in presence. The walls that had once seemed warm and welcoming now felt like silent witnesses to something terrible. Harris walked through the kitchen again, noticing small inconsistencies. A chair slightly moved, a cupboard door left ajar. Nothing significant alone, but together patterns emerged. Patterns that spoke of someone careful, deliberate, hiding more than just a person. Night fell, and the police left with instructions to check back at dawn. Mark sat alone in the dim living room, staring at the muted television. It was then that the first text arrived on his phone, a message from an unknown number. "Stop looking. You can't undo what's already done." Mark's hand shook as he read it. He quickly locked his phone and put it down, pretending to relax. But every muscle in his body was tense, every instinct screaming that someone or something was watching. Harris, back at the precinct, reviewed the case files and notes, growing increasingly uneasy. There were no signs of forced entry, no ransom notes, no immediate motive. Yet Harris knew better. The absence of obvious clues often meant the culprit was closer than anyone suspected. As midnight approached, a neighbor called in, reporting a faint noise, something like soft footsteps and a door closing at the Whitmore house. Officers returned immediately, but the house was silent again. Nothing to indicate that anyone had been there since the police had left. By morning, Harris had a list of questions that could fill hours. The first and most pressing, where was Laura Whitmore? The second, was Mark truly as innocent as he appeared? And third, what secrets were buried in that seemingly perfect family, waiting for the right, or wrong, moment to be exposed? It was clear now that this wasn't just a missing person case. It was something more, something that would unravel slowly, meticulously, terrifyingly. And as Harris prepared his notes for the day, he didn't realize that in the shadows of the Whitmore house, someone was already watching him, waiting for the next move, planning the next step. The game had begun, and everyone, willingly or not, was a part of it. That night, Mark received another message on his phone. It read, "You think you know the truth. You don't. Not yet." Somewhere inside the house, a light flickered, not from electricity, but from something else. A presence. Silent. Waiting. Watching. The Whitmore family story had only just begun, and by the time the full truth emerged, no one would remain the same. The sun rose slowly over the small town, casting long shadows across the streets. Even in daylight, the Whitmore house seemed different now. Its perfect white walls slightly ominous, its neat lawn almost mocking the chaos inside. People whispered as they passed by, their eyes lingering on the windows, trying to see what the police couldn't or wouldn't show them. Detective Harris returned early that morning, a notebook in hand, ready to dig deeper into the Whitmore family. He had spent hours the night before reviewing all the details, and something kept gnawing at him. The clean scene, the absence of obvious struggle, the carefully maintained calm, it all screamed one thing. Someone inside the house was hiding something, and probably had been for a long time. He started by reviewing Laura's personal belongings. Her laptop was open, and the password had been set to something complex. It took him nearly half an hour to crack it, but what he found made him pause. Emails, journals, and unsent messages revealed a side of Laura that no one knew. A meticulous record of fears, suspicions, and secret encounters. The entries painted a picture of tension, unease, and growing paranoia. She had written about strange phone calls late at night, unexpected visitors, and a feeling of being watched, though she never mentioned by whom. Each page ended with a subtle but chilling line, "I hope no one finds out before it's too late." Harris realized that Laura's disappearance was not spontaneous. It had been anticipated. Someone had planned to make her vanish, but why? And more importantly, who? Meanwhile, the neighborhood, once indifferent, had started buzzing with unease. Whispers became conversations, and conversations became theories. Some remembered seeing a car parked outside the Whitmore house in the late hours of the night, unfamiliar, dark, and unmarked. Others swore they saw Mark pacing in the garden when he claimed to have been asleep. Every small detail was dissected, exaggerated, and then passed along, growing in intensity with every retelling. The children, Emily and Tommy, were still in the care of a close neighbor, their small faces pale and anxious. Harris knew speaking to them directly would be delicate. Children often said too much or too little. But the smallest slip of information could crack the case wide open. He asked the neighbor to recount everything the kids had mentioned, even the most mundane details. Emily had said something strange the previous night. Mom said the shadows were listening to us. Tommy had drawn a picture showing their mother behind a locked door with figures outside, shapes that didn't match anyone he knew. Harris made a note of it. Children often perceive things adults ignore, and sometimes their perceptions are eerily accurate. Back at the house, Harris and his team examined the bedrooms in detail. Nothing appeared disturbed at first, but subtle clues emerged. A drawer slightly ajar, a scarf that didn't belong to Laura, a faint set of footprints leading from the living room to the backyard. The team photographed, documented, and collected evidence meticulously. Every inch of the house was scrutinized, yet nothing concrete surfaced, reinforcing the sense of a hidden hand orchestrating everything perfectly. Mark Whitmore, meanwhile, had grown quieter as the day progressed. His initial composure was eroding. Harris noticed his eyes flinch when certain questions were asked, particularly those about Laura's relationships, friends, and work. Every hesitation, every micro-expression was cataloged mentally. Mark had something to hide, and Harris was determined to uncover it. Late in the afternoon, Harris reviewed the digital evidence. Laura's emails revealed correspondence with an unknown contact, one she described vaguely as helpful but mysterious. Their exchanges hinted at secrets too dangerous to disclose openly. She seemed to be gathering information, perhaps suspecting someone in her life, or within the town, of dark intentions. Harris's instincts told him this was the key. Whoever this contact was, they might hold the answers to why Laura vanished and what she had discovered before that fateful night. As evening approached, Harris decided to return to the Whitmore house to conduct a more thorough forensic sweep. The sun had set, casting long shadows over the immaculate lawn. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, almost tangible. Harris moved quietly, flashlight in hand, carefully inspecting closets, cabinets, and every hidden corner. It was then he noticed a faint draft coming from the basement door, previously overlooked. A lock had been tampered with. The air smelled slightly musty, as if someone had been there recently. He signaled to his team to be cautious. Harris descended into the basement slowly, every creak of the wooden stairs amplified in the silence. The room was dark, cluttered with storage boxes, old furniture, and forgotten belongings. But in the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of crates, something caught his eye, a small, weathered box tied with string. He knelt to examine it. Inside were photographs, some of the family, some of individuals Harris did not recognize, and notes, detailed notes of dates, meetings, and observations. It was Laura's secret journal, a record of her investigation into something sinister she had sensed long before disappearing. The entries were fragmented, but the message was clear. Laura had been uncovering a pattern, a secret so disturbing that she feared for her safety. And according to the handwriting, someone close to her knew she was getting too close. At that moment, Harris heard a faint sound, a soft click, almost imperceptible. He froze. The house was supposed to be empty, aside from the police team. Slowly, his hand moved to the flashlight. A shadow shifted near the stairs, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. He called out, but no response came. The tension was palpable. Someone was in the house. Harris's mind raced. Was it an intruder? Or was someone familiar trying to monitor their investigation? Every possibility was terrifying. He instructed the team to sweep the area again, keeping silent and careful. The air seemed to thicken, every corner now a potential hiding spot. Meanwhile, Mark sat in the living room, pretending to read, but his phone was in hand, screen glowing intermittently. He sent brief messages to an unknown number, his fingers moving too quickly, too deliberately. Harris's intuition screamed that Mark was communicating, perhaps coordinating with someone, perhaps controlling the next move. Night deepened, and the neighborhood outside had fallen into uneasy quiet. Harris knew that with each passing hour, the window to uncover the truth narrowed. Whoever was responsible for Laura's disappearance had already planned multiple steps ahead. Every clue they found was part of a larger, more intricate web. As the officers packed up for a brief break, a message appeared on Mark's phone. They're getting too close. Stop them. His hand trembled slightly, betraying the calm mask he had maintained all day. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of the streetlights, a figure observed the Whitmore house. Silent, patient, waiting. The first real threat had emerged, and the game of shadows had officially begun. By midnight, Harris reviewed all the evidence again. Laura's emails, the hidden journal, the strange footprints, the shadow in the basement, and Mark's inconsistent behavior, all pointed to a truth darker than he had imagined. One that could shatter the illusion of the Whitmore family completely. The night ended with more questions than answers. Who had been in the house? What was Mark hiding? What exactly had Laura discovered? And most importantly, would the detectives uncover it before it was too late? The quiet town slept fitfully, unaware that the shadows lurking in the Whitmore house were far from gone. And as the first rays of dawn would soon hit the street, the next revelation waited to surface, ready to shock everyone. Just as Harris was leaving for the night, a faint knock echoed from the basement door. No one else was supposed to be in the house. Trembling, Harris approached, hand hovering over his flashlight. He swung the beam downward and froze. There, scrawled on the basement wall in what looked like Laura's handwriting, were the words, "If you're reading this, it's already too late." Somewhere inside, someone or something was still watching. The Whitmore story was far from over. The morning after the chilling basement discovery, the Whitmore house felt heavier, darker, as if the walls themselves were aware of the secrets being unearthed. Detective Harris returned with a forensic team, his mind racing with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. He had reviewed the basement writings multiple times overnight. The phrase, "If you were reading this, it's already too late," haunting him, echoing in his thoughts like a grim warning. The neighborhood, once merely curious, had turned into a hive of speculation. Neighbors whispered about what they had seen or thought they had seen. A delivery driver mentioned seeing Laura near the corner of the street late at night, though no one could confirm the date. A jogger claimed to have noticed Mark pacing near the garage, glancing repeatedly toward the street. Every story, Every recollection was a piece of a puzzle that didn't yet form a complete image. Inside the house, Harris began a more methodical search. He revisited Laura's journals, emails, and notes. Every page was scanned for patterns, for names, for hints at why she might have feared for her life. There were repeated references to someone she called the Shadow, a presence she believed was always near, watching her every move. The entries grew darker with each passing day, documenting her increasing anxiety and sense of being hunted. Harris wondered aloud if Laura's disappearance was connected to a secret Mark had been hiding all along. He remembered the unknown messages Mark had sent the night before, the cryptic warning, "They're getting too close. Stop them." The timing of the messages, combined with Laura's fears, created an unnerving picture. Meanwhile, the children remained under the care of a trusted neighbor, their behavior showing the first signs of trauma. Emily refused to eat and spent hours holding her stuffed animal close, whispering about shadows she claimed were moving in the house. Tommy, normally quiet, had become unusually talkative, recounting strange noises and things moving when no one was around. Harris knew that children often sense danger adults ignore, and he began piecing together their fragmented testimonies. Mark was growing restless, pacing the living room with a mechanical calm that bordered on eerie. Harris confronted him again, asking pointed questions about his whereabouts the night of Laura's disappearance. Mark repeated his story, but his eyes flickered, betraying the carefully constructed mask of innocence. Harris's instinct screamed that the man was hiding far more than he admitted. Hours passed as the investigation intensified. The team cataloged footprints, fingerprints, and electronic traces. Harris discovered that several of Laura's devices had been tampered with. Emails were deleted, phone records altered. Someone had been meticulously covering their tracks. The precision suggested a plan, not a spontaneous act. Late in the afternoon, Harris received a call from a neighbor who had gone through some old photographs found in the Whitmore garage. Among them were images that didn't fit the family narrative. Pictures of Laura meeting with unknown individuals, her expression tense and wary. Some photographs depicted Mark, but his posture and gaze suggested unease rather than the calm confidence he displayed publicly. These images added a layer of complexity to the case, indicating that the Whitmore's perfect image was carefully curated and possibly deceptive. As night fell, Harris returned to the basement with Kim and the forensic team. They used specialized lights to reveal hidden markings on the walls, barely visible to the naked eye. Symbols, names, and dates, all pointing towards something premeditated and sinister. The realization hit Harris hard. Laura had been tracking someone, and that someone was aware. In the shadows of the basement, Harris felt a presence, subtle but unmistakable. A creak behind him, a movement that didn't belong. He swung the flashlight, illuminating nothing but stacked boxes and discarded furniture. Yet the sensation remained. Someone or something was there, observing every move. Upstairs, Mark's behavior was increasingly erratic. He spoke to himself softly, pacing, occasionally glancing toward the basement. Harris noted the pattern. Moments of calm interspersed with bursts of agitation, almost as if Mark was expecting someone or preparing for an unseen confrontation. By midnight, the investigation reached a critical point. The evidence suggested that Laura's disappearance was not random. It was targeted, deliberate, and executed with an almost surgical precision. Harris theorized that the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of the household, the routines, and the family dynamics. Suddenly, a noise from outside broke the tense silence. A car engine, a faint light moving across the street. Harris signaled to his team to stay alert. The figure outside lingered momentarily, then disappeared into the darkness. The timing was too coincidental, too calculated to ignore. Someone was monitoring the investigation, aware of every step the police took. As the team reviewed the night's findings, Harris pieced together a chilling possibility. Laura had discovered something that someone close to her wanted buried forever. And Mark, whether complicit or manipulated, was now at the center of a storm that could destroy the entire family facade. Back in the living room, Mark received another text on his phone. This one was shorter, more direct. They know more than they should. Handle it now. His face paled slightly, but he quickly regained composure, sliding the device back into his pocket. The message hinted at layers of manipulation, secrecy, and control that extended beyond the house, possibly reaching into the very community that had once admired the Whitmores. And then came the most disturbing discovery of the night. In Laura's notebook, hidden beneath pages of mundane notes and shopping lists, was a folded envelope. It had no return address, only Laura's handwriting on the front. Open if I disappear. Harris carefully unfolded the envelope. Inside were photographs, diagrams, and a detailed account of someone she feared, someone she had been tracking meticulously. The content revealed a plan, a schedule, and names that suggested Laura had known precisely who was orchestrating events against her. Harris felt the weight of the revelation. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was a meticulously plotted sequence of events, with Laura as the key observer and potentially the next target. Outside, the street remained quiet, almost deceptively calm. The lights in the Whitmore house flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. And for a moment, Harris felt the creeping sense that the house itself was alive, watching, waiting, guarding secrets that were not meant to be uncovered. The night ended with one final, unsettling moment. As Harris prepared to leave, he glanced at the basement door. A shadow moved behind it, too deliberate to be a trick of light. He froze, flashlight trained on the dark corner. The figure did not move further, but remained visible long enough to imprint a chilling image in his mind. A tall silhouette, calm, patient, and aware of every action taking place. The Whitmore family's secrets were deeper than anyone had imagined. And as the first rays of dawn would soon touch the street, one thing was clear. The next revelation would shock not only the investigators but the entire town. The folded envelope, the shadow in the basement, and the cryptic messages all pointed toward a terrifying truth. Someone inside the Whitmore house had been controlling the narrative all along. As Harris locked up the house for the night, he didn't notice the faint glow of a phone in the darkness. Mark's phone. A single message blinked on the screen. Tomorrow it all ends. The Whitmore story was approaching its breaking point, and no one, not even the detectives, could predict what would happen next. The morning sun cast its first light on the Whitmore house, but there was no sense of warmth, only a chilling reminder of what had transpired. Detective Harris arrived early, determined to piece together the final threads of a puzzle that had grown darker and more twisted with every passing day. He knew the truth was close, but as he stepped inside, he felt the weight of unseen eyes on him, a tension that refused to lift. Mark Whitmore greeted him at the door, calm as ever on the surface, but Harris could see it in his eyes. The careful mask was slipping. The envelope Laura had left, the messages, the shadows, they all pointed toward a truth that Mark could no longer contain. Harris motioned for him to sit, and Mark did so, hands resting nervously on the armrests of the chair. "Detective," Mark said quietly, "I want to tell you everything, but you have to understand, it's complicated." Harris nodded. "We've been through complicated before, Mark. It's time for the truth." Mark took a deep breath, and slowly, the story emerged. Laura had discovered something no one was supposed to know. Years ago, Mark had been involved with a group, people who controlled things behind the scenes in the town. He never intended for Laura to find out, but her natural curiosity and meticulous nature had led her to piece together fragments of the truth. The envelopes, the journal, the messages, they were all her way of documenting what she had learned, preparing for a moment she feared might come. Harris listened intently. Mark admitted that he had tried to protect his family by keeping Laura unaware, but her persistence had created tension he could no longer control. That night, in a heated argument, things had spiraled out of control. Laura had fled into the basement, intending to hide, and Mark had tried to prevent her from leaving with his knowledge spilling out. He hadn't meant to harm her physically, but the fear and panic of the situation had resulted in her disappearance. As Mark spoke, Harris realized the full extent of the deception. The Whitmore family had projected perfection outwardly, but internally, fear and secrecy had governed their actions. The children, innocent and unaware, had been exposed to tensions they could not understand, and the neighbors had been misled by a facade that hid truths too heavy for any ordinary town to bear. With forensic evidence and Laura's detailed notes, Harris coordinated a search of the basement and nearby areas. Hours passed, and finally, they found her, alive but shaken, hidden behind a false wall in the basement. Her eyes, wide with fear, met Harris's, and she whispered, "I knew someone was watching, but I didn't know who I could trust." Reunited with her children, the first tears of relief were shed. Emily and Tommy clung to their mother, sobbing, while Harris and his team ensured the home was safe and secure. Mark was arrested, not for premeditated harm, but for the reckless decisions made in fear and secrecy. The truth had finally come to light, and the town would never view the Whitmores the same way again. But beyond the procedural outcomes, the story left a deeper impression. Laura's courage, her meticulous tracking, and her refusal to be silenced reminded everyone that the bravest acts often come quietly, from those who observe, think, and act in the shadows. Mark's choices, though misguided, highlighted how fear and secrecy can corrode even the most outwardly perfect relationships. As the sun set that evening, Harris reflected on the case, the town silent around him. There was a lesson in every shadow, a warning in every facade, and a truth in every act of courage. Laura had survived because she refused to ignore what felt wrong, because she trusted her instincts, and because even in the darkest moments, she held on a hope. The moral of the story settled deep in Harris's mind, and it was a truth that resonated far beyond the Whitmore household. Perfection is often an illusion. Secrets and fear can hide behind the brightest smiles. But courage, honesty, and trust, these are what truly define a family, a community, and a life worth living. Never ignore the quiet instincts of your heart, for they may be the only guide through the darkness. The Whitmore family would never be the same, but perhaps in facing the truth, they would find a real beginning. A chance to rebuild not on appearances, but on trust, honesty, and love. And so, the story ended, not with a scream or a shadow, but with the quiet realization that every truth, no matter how deeply hidden, has a way of emerging, and that courage can light even the darkest night.